victim blaming, basically.
Blaming.
Yeah. And that gets us to, it's not our fault. It's your fault.
It's not our fault. It's your fault.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And what that does effectively, it's such an interesting tactic because I've thought about this a while. It divides people. It says, because there are people inevitably whom this impacts, and their empirical experience, they know that something is wrong here. But then the people who haven't directly experienced, if you can convince them, or a significant portion of them, that this isn't you're going to avoid this if you just do the right thing, then you've got these two different groups who are fighting each other, and the elite, the corporation, or the very wealthy person is sitting back and cackling to themselves.
Counting their money.
Exactly. Counting their money while everybody else is fighting about it.
So, for example, if you just wouldn't ever buy 90% of the products that you find in your grocery store, then you wouldn't have to worry about diabetes. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you ignored 100% of the television advertising for food, and didn't buy 9 out of 10 items in your grocery store, then you'd be perfectly healthy.
Yeah. If you discarded all the advice that we pushed out on mass media for you to absorb, then you'd be fine.
You'd be fine.
That's a really interesting thing with a few examples, but specifically smoking. They go from saying nicotine is not addictive over and over, there's no problem, to then saying, look, if you smoke after all the warnings you've been given, that's on you. You can't sue us now for all the carcinogens, et cetera. We've been warned by the Surgeon General for however many years. That's your problem. You did this to yourself, even though we're making
it's like a massive, deadly global version of tap tap no backs. It's
That's right. And that leads right into, of course, the free market can fix it.
Yes.
The ultimate neoliberal canard.
Yeah.
That markets are perfectly efficient, allocate resources perfectly efficiently, and all you have to do is let the market work, and all of this stuff will work itself out. So why have food safety regulations when, if you kill enough people with botulism, people will just learn and somehow avoid the foods that have it?
I know. It's interesting that's such a hyper-capitalist approach, and there's so many problems with let the free market decide, because the free market basically, when it comes down to it, is whatever the person who is saying that decides that it is. The free market is a very nebulous thing, but to the example that you give, Nick, it's, if you think about it, it's kind of Stalinist in that, you remember that Stalinist said, a single death is a tragedy, and a million deaths are a statistic. Right. And it's inhuman. Basically, okay, the free market is going to decide, okay, all these people are going to be poor, all these millions of people are going to die, and you'll probably be okay, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think so.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that leads to, it's a job killer, which you've heard 1,000 times. Mm-hmm. Anything we do to address any of these problems will kill jobs, destroy the economy. We'll all have to live in cardboard shacks and blah, 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 blah. And how many times have we heard that? Of course, it's never been true, which in turn leads to you'll only make it worse. Yeah. The unintended consequences argument that should you decide to address this problem, I think Joan bringing up Ronald Reagan's thing, which is that, we tried to fix poverty and poverty loss, which is another way of saying, that helping the poor harms the poor, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That the more we try to help, the worse we make it, which is always nonsense. It of course is true that some things we do to help people are not effective.
Right. That's the thing. There's always a kernel of truth, like there. But
we can study those things and we can talk about them. We can debate them as people who care about public policy. But the blanket idea that the government never did anything to improve poverty is ridiculous. And it's come. I think the fun thing. Nick and I are in touch over text or email or whatever as we're getting ready for the book to come out. And every day there's a new example of, one of these old arguments. In Florida, the African American Studies curriculum now has to say that slavery benefited some of the enslaved. It gave them skills. We've got quotes in the book from slavery defenders saying how good it was for Black people, these Africans who had no culture, had no religion, blah, blah, blah. This is not quite what Ron DeSantis is saying, but you got to teach it benefited some people. We have a lot of really great quotes about child labor and how good it is for children. And, one of my favorites is a manufacturer who's saying, I would like to pit our kids who work in the factories against those pampered rich kids who don't work. They would take them any day.
And you see, it so often comes down to pitting folks against each other.
Right.
The powerful pitting the rest of us against each other. So
these kids are getting, they're in fighting shape. And now we're seeing a lot of states loosening their restrictions on child labor. We just saw the expiration of the child tax credit, which was passed as part of COVID relief. It expired. We couldn't get the Democrats. In the end, we couldn't get Joe Manchin basically on board. But the arguments against it used to be a Republican idea. Just like Obamacare once was Romney Care, the child tax credit part of it came from the Heritage Foundation. And then a couple months ago, you saw in the Wall Street Journal, the guy who wrote the very first paper saying, I thought it was a good idea, but no, it cuts back on the time that mothers are working. If they're getting that, they're not working, so they're not grabbing their lunch bucket or
mothers are always working.
Yeah, exactly. Mine is 33 and I'm always working. It's just like, it hurts the kids. You think you lifted half of the kids in poverty, you lifted them out of poverty, but you hurt them because maybe, and there's actually not, I'm writing about this right now. So there's no hard evidence that tax credit caused any drop in the workforce participation of the parents who received it. I shouldn't just say mothers because fathers, two-parent households, everybody got it to a certain level. So they flip around and here we are again saying a program that legitimately cut child poverty in half, bad for children because their parents just won't work as hard. So tough. Sorry, kids.
So
and then the final one is, of course, it's socialism. Right?
Oh God.
Just invoking that anything that's good for people generally must be socialism and therefore will lead to the gulags and I cannot count the number of times that Bill Clinton was called a socialist, that Joe Biden is being called a socialist, like the most conservative parts of the Democratic Party are labeled. It's this weird mental jujitsu that's designed to it makes no sense whatsoever, but people repeat it and so people buy it. Yeah. Dude, I've started 40 companies and people call me a socialist. Because I think we should raise the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right. Socialism.
So how do we stem this rising tide of bullshit? Like what steps can we take? What dikes can we construct to save us from this nonsense?
I hate to be so self-promotional, but buy the book. Honestly,
give it to your friends.
Yeah. It starts with just recognizing these patterns.
Yeah.
Once you see it, you can't not see
yourself.
It.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those things where it's so in our culture and in the media that you don't even notice it until you do. And then it's everywhere. And then it starts to piss you off. And then as a citizen, you have the beginnings of the tools to start to push back. And I think the key thing, one of my objectives here is to convert fear into anger, right?
Yeah.
If you believe these stories, they make you afraid. This is the goal, is to make you fearful. Oh my God, I'm going to get fired. Oh my God, the economy will collapse. Oh my God, unintended consequences. Oh my, all that.
Yeah.
And once you realize that this is just a ruse, these are intimidation tactics masquerading as economics.
Yeah.
You go from fear to anger. And when people get angry, then they really start to push back. And then the people who are spewing the bullshit, they get fearful.
Yeah.
And when they get fearful, that's when change happens.
Yeah.
I would also say that laughter is part of it. You know, we all need a good laugh, and we want to make these people a little bit ridiculous. We want you to be angry, but we also want you to enjoy their humiliation and enjoy just breaking down how ridiculous it is and how you can see it in your own life. I mean, you know, we have a case study on the Seattle's effort to raise the minimum wage, and all of these people from the restaurant industry saying this is going to decimate Seattle's restaurants. You know, they're just going to go out of business. And I was in Seattle recently, and there are a lot of really great restaurants, guys. I don't know if you know that, but you know, it's just
they didn't all disappear.
They're still there, you know. So it's sort of like, obviously businesses struggle, small businesses especially come and go. Yeah. There are things we could do to help certain sectors of small business that we don't do, but we invoke small business. Oh, small businesses can't handle parental leave. You know, small businesses are just going to collapse if we, and most of our laws therefore exempt the smallest businesses from certain requirements. But you know, it's also big corporations talking the language of small business to act again like they're the defenders of the mom.
And that's something that occurs to me. I don't know. I forget whether you deal with that in the book specifically, but the idea of like saying small business this, small business that. My hackles get raised whenever I hear that, because almost inevitably that's something that's being used by a large business one way or another to make themselves like, oh, I'm just a little small business. Help me.
That's right. It's a big business hiding behind a small business.
Yeah, or even just the word small business. So thank you so much for putting this together. It is a wonderful and casual and uplifting and hilarious compendium of many, many lies. And I encourage people to check it out, put it on their coffee table, wherever they do their reading. Again, it's Corporate Bullshit, exposing the lies and half-truths that protect profit, power, and wealth in America. Joan Walsh, Nick Hanauer, thank you for writing it, and thank you so much for being here on Facepalm America.
Fabulous. So fun to be here.
Yeah.
Up next, side hustles. This is Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Rockland. Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Rockland. Side hustles are, I don't know, it's such a weird term. Side hustles. It's like you're really getting yourself going, and like you have a regular job, but you got something else going on the side, and that's what's going to make it really big. Well, number one, that is not really the way it usually works for most people. Sometimes, occasionally, we hear about Apple starting in a garage. Isn't that the ultimate side hustle? But these days, usually the side hustle is the main hustle. And it's the main thing you end up doing. If you're working for DoorDash, and that's the thing, you're technically not working for them. You're an independent contractor. It's wonderful. Or you're working for Uber or Lyft. And companies love that. Big companies love that because it means they don't have to pay you benefits. It means they don't have to take care of you in any way. It means that they don't have to pay the taxes that they really owe in order to make sure that you, as a person, as a human being, are taken care of. And in the next few days, we're going to speak to Alexandria Ravenel. She is the author of Side Hustle Safety Net, How Vulnerable Workers Survive Precarious Times. And these are very precarious times because our safety net has a bunch of gaping holes in it. It doesn't really work. And fewer people have stable, ongoing, reliable jobs. And to replace them, all these side hustles come up. Those aren't really jobs. Those are pittance. And so in the next few days, we're going to talk with her about that. I think it's going to be very interesting.